Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Putin-Trump meet is possible this month, says Kremlin. Donald Trump accuses Ukraine for starting the war with Russia. President Zelensky says attempts to replace him during the war will fail as US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg visits Kiev. French President Emmanuel Macron set to host new emergency talks on Ukraine as EU approves 16th package of sanctions against Russia. And in the Champions Trophy, Pakistan take on New Zealand in Karachi as it hosts a major ICC cricket tournament in 3 decades. New diplomatic talks between the United States of America and Russia are moving fast to discuss a potential path to end the conflict in Ukraine. However, Kremlin has said that the Riyadh talks were focused mostly on bilateral ties, but that it was a very important step towards reaching a settlement on the Ukraine conflict. It said that ties will first need reanimation of relations, then restoration. We get you more in our next report.
US President Donald Trump's administration has agreed to more talks with Moscow on ending the conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine, livid at being excluded from the talks that will decide its future, has been vocal in rejecting any peace negotiations that occur without its direct involvement. President Zelensky has now postponed a planned visit to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday to next month to avoid giving legitimacy to the talks. Trump has, however, dismissed Ukraine's objections and concerns about being left out of the talks. Trump, in fact, blamed it on Kiev that the conflict has stretched so long.
And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their side.
For Russia, the main contentious issue and an absolute red line has been Ukraine's NATO membership. Russia has insisted NATO to not grant membership to Ukraine. Moscow is also seeking assurances that NATO will not expand further into Eastern Europe. European leaders have expressed unease over the issue.
As we explained today, the appearance of troops of armed forces from the aforementioned NATO countries, but under a foreign flag, under the flag of the European Union or under national flags, does not change anything in this regard. This, of course, is unacceptable to us.
Meanwhile, European leaders have begun discussions about sending peacekeeping troops to Ukraine in the event of a peace deal. In contrast with Moscow's hardline opposition to any NATO involvement, Trump said he would not oppose the deployment of European peacekeepers.
If they want to do that, that's great. I'm all for it. If they want to do that, I think that'd be fine. I mean, I know France has mentioned it, others have mentioned it, UK has mentioned it, but if we have a peace deal, I think having troops over there from the standpoint of Europe, we won't have to put any over there because, we're very far away. But having troops over there would be fine. I would not object to it at all.
Europe is also charting its own way in the event of US-Russia talks. France is hosting a second meeting to discuss Ukraine and European security on Wednesday with several other European and non-European states. While in Riyadh, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio emerged from the meeting optimistic that Russia is ready to begin a serious negotiation process and tried to reassure allies, emphasizing that no one is being sidelined in the negotiations.
I would say to you that in order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today or in a press conference for that matter. But, and there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed. So, but I guess the point here is the goal is, and we agreed on what the goal is to bring an end to this conflict in a way that's fair, enduring, sustainable, and acceptable to all parties involved. What that looks like, well, that's what the ongoing engagement is going to be all about.
Also on the cards is a high-profile meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Trump confirmed that he might meet Putin before the end of this month without going into specifics. Trump also suggested that Ukraine should hold elections, a proposal he says is supported by multiple nations. The world is watching the developments rather closely as the future of Ukraine and Europe hangs in balance. The key question remains, can any agreement between the US and Russia bring lasting peace in Eastern Europe? The stakes are incredibly high, and every decision will invariably impact the future of Ukraine, Europe, and the global security matrix. Aarti Rana and Shubhendu Ghosh's report for DD India.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed claims about his approval ratings being at 4% as Russian disinformation and said attempts to replace him during the war against Russia would not work. Zelensky told journalists during a press briefing in Kiev on Wednesday that President Trump helped Putin to come out of years of isolation, adding that the US leader lives in the disinformation space himself.
If someone wants to replace me right now, I would say it won't happen right now. As we are talking about 4%, we have seen this disinformation. We understand it's coming from Russia. We understand that, and we have proof that these numbers are being discussed between America and Russia. So, unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation, and we really respect the American nation, who supported us all the time. Unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space.
Meanwhile, a day after Riyadh talks, US Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, arrived in Ukraine. Ahead of his meeting with President Zelensky and military leaders, Kellogg said that the visit will give both sides a chance to have good, substantial talks, adding that the talks will build on the weakened conversations at the Munich Security Conference. He, however, stressed that part of his mission would be to sit and listen. Ukraine has repeatedly stressed the need for security guarantees from the US that would deter Russia from launching a new offensive once a peace deal is reached. Kellogg earlier on Wednesday concluded his Poland visit, where he met Polish President Andrzej Duda. Kellogg attended the Munich Security Conference, where he said Europe will not have a seat at the table for Ukraine peace talks. The European Union on Wednesday has agreed on a 16th package of sanctions against Russia that include a ban on primary aluminium imports, sales of gaming consoles, and the listing of 73 shadow fleet vessels. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, took to social media site X, welcoming the move and also writing that EU is committed to keep up the pressure on Kremlin. The package is expected to be adopted by EU foreign ministers on Monday, which also comprises of asset freezes and a travel ban. The latest sanctions come after US President Donald Trump's administration said on Tuesday that it had agreed to hold more talks with Russia on ending the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron was set to host a new meeting on Ukraine on Thursday in a bid to coordinate a European response to what he called an existential threat from Russia after a shocking policy shift in Washington. Macron planned to speak to leaders of around 15 countries, with most taking part by video link, according to the presidency. US President Donald Trump has stunned the European Union by indicating that he is ready to resume diplomacy with President Vladimir Putin after 3 years of Russia's conflict against Ukraine and discuss the fate of pro-Western country over the heads of not only Europe but also Kiev. Urging a coordinated response to Washington's shocking policy shift on Russia, Macron on Monday convened key European leaders as well as NATO and EU chiefs for emergency talks. So it's been 11 years since the annexation of Crimea, and next week it will be 3 years when the conflict in Ukraine began. The new administration in the US says it wants to move quickly to end the war and bring peace. A first round of talks started in Saudi Arabia and EU representatives watched carefully. Lars Holte is with Deutsche Welle and joins me from Berlin now on the story. Lars, what can you tell us about these meetings yesterday?
Thanks for having me. Well, from a European perspective, it is most important to say that we were not only watching carefully, but that we were watching from the sidelines, as were the Ukrainians. And that is outright ridiculous. It is obvious that peace talks can only happen with all parties involved sitting at a table. However, the US administration, playing peacemaker here, found neutral ground to meet in Saudi Arabia, but then only invited Moscow to talk. And US Secretary of State Marco Rubio now admitted that a second meeting will have to follow soon and that it will be with Ukraine and the EU present. Ukrainian President Zelensky so far only said he would never agree to any agreement done without his country's input, only to be surprised overnight by President Trump in Washington, accusing his country of actually starting the conflict in the first place. Yes, Donald Trump saying that Ukraine should have never started this. Quote, it's absolutely unbelievable how he's blaming the victim for Russia's aggression here. Anyway, for Europe and especially the EU as an economic bloc, they are open to join any talks. After all, the situation with Russia is key to the continent and the bloc's future security.
Lars, can you tell us why the US is suddenly taking such an action, pressing so hard for peace after 3 years of mostly standing by?
Well, much of this action by US President Trump has to do with money, the economic impact of the war. But it's somewhat complicated. Obviously, much of the world wanted that war to stop a long time ago, including the previous US administration. But they saw, as did others, little chance of Moscow backing down, and they weren't willing to sacrifice Ukraine to placate Moscow either. Now, Trump might have little problem with the latter, and he just confirmed that with his latest statements. He is rumored to push for Moscow ending the war and granting them part of the Ukrainian territory. He doesn't seem to care about what message that sends, how it would embolden Putin to maybe invade other countries too for at least some land gain. That's all not important to Trump. He wants to get out of paying Ukraine billions in military support, and he wants to normalize business relations between the US and Moscow. After all, US businesses have lost $300 billion worth of business when the war started and they fled Russia.
Thank you, Lars. Lars Holte reporting from DW Berlin. Moving on to the East, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA chief, visited Japan's stricken Fukushima plant on Wednesday, the day after Tokyo approved an energy plan that marks a return to nuclear power. IAEA is monitoring Japan's efforts to decommission the Fukushima Daiichi plant after a 2011 earthquake triggered tsunami, killed 18,000 people and set off the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. Speaking to media persons, Grossi said the timeline for disposal of contaminated Fukushima soil by 2045 is not unrealistic.
We visited the interim soil facility and also the demonstration site for the recycled soil demonstration site. In terms of the timing, which has been, of course, set by law for 2045, we believe that it is not unrealistic. It can be done. It will require, of course, consistency of budgetary commitment by the government.
The Japanese cabinet recently adopted a plan to increase reliance on nuclear power to help meet growing energy demand for artificial intelligence and microchip factories. Japan had previously vowed to reduce reliance on nuclear power as much as possible. But this pledge was dropped from the latest strategic energy plan, which includes an intention to make renewables the country's top power source by 2040. Under the plan, nuclear power will account for around 20% of Japan's energy supply by 2040, up from 5.6% in 2022. You're with us on DD India Live, still to come on the show. Dozens pray for Pope Francis' recovery as he is diagnosed with double pneumonia. And Delhi is set to find out who will be its next chief minister later today.
Timeless, boundless, and infinite. The essence of faith. The soul of Sanatan culture. From the sacred confluence of Prayag, where divinity descends to earth. Witness the grandeur, the devotion, the magic. World's largest cultural and spiritual gathering, with over 450 million devotees expected to attend. Mahakumbh, India's greatest festival of faith. Exclusively on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to West Asia. In an assessment released by the United Nations, the European Union and the World Bank on Tuesday stated that more than $50 billion will be required to rebuild Gaza. The Israel-Hamas conflict has caused extensive damage and will require more than 10 years of rebuilding work, depending on the speed, scale and scope of recovery. The process of reconstruction includes clearing millions of tons of rubble. The interim rapid damage and needs assessment has said that 15 months of conflict has damaged homes, whereas 95% of hospitals are left non-functional. Donald Trump was sworn in as the US president on January 20th, ushering in a 4-year term with promises to push the limits of executive power, from the threat of tariffs to the Riviera of the Middle East. Our next report tells you what else he has accomplished in a month of his presidency.
Donald Trump was sworn in as the US president on January 20th. On the same day, he pardoned 1,500 people who attacked the US Capitol 4 years ago. On January 23rd, Trump said that he is not sure the United States should be spending anything on NATO. In the same month, on January 29th, Trump ordered preparation of a facility at Guantanamo Bay for 30,000 migrants. On January 30th, Trump said that the mid-air aircraft collision was a result of FAA's efforts to hire a diverse workforce. On the 1st of February, Trump announced 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports. He also announced 10% tariffs on goods from China starting February 4th. On the same day, he declared that tariffs would remain until a national emergency over fentanyl and illegal immigration ends. 2 days later, on February 3rd, Trump paused new tariffs on Mexico for 1 month. This was after Mexico agreed to deploy 10,000 National Guard members at the border with USA. On the same day, Trump announced postponement of tariffs on Canadian imports for at least 30 days. The next day, on February 4th, Trump suggested permanently displacing Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. He said that people in Gaza had no alternative but to leave, and added that US will take control of the area. On the same day, Trump suggested that Gaza could become the Riviera of the Middle East. Further, Trump signed executive order to exclude transgender girls from female-designated sporting competitions. On 6th of February, Trump authorized sanctions on people who worked on ICC investigations of US citizens or allies like Israel. On 9th of February, Trump signed a Gulf of America Day proclamation aboard Air Force One. On 12th of February, Trump said that Putin and Zelensky have expressed a desire for peace in separate phone calls with him. On the same day, Trump ordered top US officials to begin talks on ending the war in Ukraine.
Pope Francis spent a peaceful night in the hospital and ate breakfast on Wednesday, the Vatican said in its latest update on the pontiff's health. Pope Francis has been diagnosed with double pneumonia after further tests showed a continuing complex medical situation. Dozens of faithfuls prayed for Pope Francis' recovery outside Rome's Gemelli Hospital. Francis has been suffering from a respiratory infection for more than a week and was admitted to Rome's hospital on February 14th. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will leave for a two-day visit to Johannesburg on Thursday. The Prime Minister will participate in the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting at the invitation of the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, Ronald Lamola. Jaishankar's participation in the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting will strengthen India's engagement with the G20 countries and bolster the voice of the Global South in this important forum. Dr. Jaishankar is expected to hold few bilateral meetings on the margins of this Foreign Ministers meet. India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party is all set to announce the name for Delhi's Chief Minister after a meeting to be held on Wednesday evening at the party office. The meet will be attended by top party officials. Preparations are underway for the oath-taking of the Chief Minister that will be held on Thursday in a grand ceremony at the Ramlila ground. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah, along with other prominent leaders, will attend the ceremony. Security has been beefed up at the ceremony site with deployment of more than 5,000 police personnel. Other security arrangements in place include paramilitary forces, emergency response teams, snipers, quick reaction teams and SWAT commandos. With VVIP and other dignitaries scheduled to be part of the event, multiple layers of security barricades have been put up. The BJP returns to power in Delhi after 27 years. It defeated Aam Aadmi Party in the February 5th election by securing 48 of the 70 seats. India's job market continues to show resilience as the National Statistics Office, under the Ministry of Statistics and Programme Implementation, released its 25th Periodic Labour Force Survey for the quarter October to December 2024. The latest data sheds light on key employment trends in the country. Unemployment rate in urban areas among persons of 15 years of age and above decreased from 6.5% during October-December 2023 to 6.4% during October-December 2024. Unemployment rate among males of 15 years of age and above remained same as 5.8% during October-December 2023 and October-December 2024. Unemployment rate among females of 15 years of age and above decreased from 8.6% in October-December 2023 to 8.1% in October-December 2024. The 33rd Taj Mahotsav, a grand celebration of art, craft, culture and cuisine, kicked off in the North Indian city of Agra on Tuesday evening with vibrant cultural performances. The 10-day festival, running from February 18th to 27th, is themed The Grand Confluence of Culture. Over 375 artisans from across the country are showcasing their craftsmanship and cultural heritage. And now let's take a look at what else is making news in India. Speaking on the fecal bacteria report of the Mahakumbh, Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath dismissed these concerns regarding fecal contamination in the waters of the Triveni Sangam in the UP Assembly on Wednesday. He stated the report is a false campaign with an aim to defame the grand Hindu festival of Mahakumbh. Meanwhile, the Mahakumbh in 2025 in Uttar Pradesh's Prayagraj continues, drawing large number of devotees to the sacred Triveni Sangam, seeking spiritual purification and blessings. As the Mela proceeds, over 9.39 million devotees have taken the holy dip at the confluence as of 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Indian Navy's first training squadron comprising INS Sujata and ICGS Veera departed from Sihanoukville, Cambodia after concluding a successful visit. During the 3-day visit, the Indian Navy engaged with the Royal Cambodian Navy on various fronts, forging deeper bonds. And on to some sporting action now. The 8th edition of the Champions Trophy 2025 kick-started on Wednesday with host Pakistan locking horns with New Zealand in Karachi. After losing early wickets, New Zealand bounced back and battled through the middle overs to cross the 250-run mark in the 45th over. New Zealand's Will Young played fearlessly and brought up his 4th ODI century before getting dismissed by Naseem Shah. Apart from him, Tom Latham also showcased an impressive performance and scored a 95-ball century. For Pakistan, Naseem Shah took 2 wickets while Abrar Ahmed and Haris Rauf bagged 1 each. So the action continues in the Champions Trophy in Pakistan. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And you can also download our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.